The Ulysses should not have been space-worthy. It was a miracle of human stubbornness, a patchwork of scavenged parts and questionable engineering, held together by hope, desperation, and a frankly irresponsible amount of duct tape. It was not sleek. It was not elegant. It was not even particularly reliable. But it was all they had. Captain Miravoss leaned against the rust-speckled bulkhead of the bridge, arms crossed, watching as the ship's primary display flickered between functional and unreadable. "Arun," she called over her shoulder, "why is my radar having a seizure?" Dr. Arun Patel, chief engineer, theoretical physicist, and walking caffeine dependency, swiveled from his console. His thick glasses magnified the deep bags under his eyes. "Well, Captain, that would be because our sense array is made up of 3 incompatible systems jury-rigged into one. Zavar Tech doesn't like old Terran circuits, and the Brockery long-range scanner is temperamental." "Temperamental?" Mira arched an eyebrow. "It's detecting objects in 3 dimensions," Arun explained, rubbing his temples. "Just not necessarily the right ones." Lieutenant Samara Sam DeWitt, the Ulysses' best pilot, which meant she was the only one crazy enough to fly it, slouched in her chair, booted feet resting on the edge of her console. "So what you're saying is we might see incoming threats, or we might see a particularly aggressive hallucination." Essentially, Rex O'Malley, resident wildcard and professional troublemaker, let out a low whistle. "I like those odds." He leaned back against a storage crate, arms behind his head, looking entirely too pleased. Mira sighed. "You like any odds that suggest we might explode?" "Well, sure," Rex said with a grin, "but only if we explode last." Their mission was simple in theory. Scout a Zavar supply route and determine if the enemy was gearing up for another major offensive. In practice, it meant taking a barely functional warship into hostile space with a skeleton crew and outdated weaponry. Mira straightened, rolling out her shoulders. "Sam, get us into position near the supply corridor. Stay quiet. We don't want to get spotted." Sam saluted lazily. "Aye, Captain." She swung her feet off the console and adjusted the thrusters, guiding the Ulysses through the vast, lightless stretch between systems. The ship vibrated as she corrected course. "Just a heads up. If the starboard thruster cuts out again, we're going to drift left like a drunk spacer." "That's reassuring," Mira muttered. For a few minutes, the bridge settled into tense silence, the steady hum of the ship the only sound. Arun monitored the sensors, tweaking them in the hopes of getting a clearer picture. Sam adjusted their trajectory in tiny, deliberate bursts. Rex toyed with a combat knife, flipping it between his fingers with practiced ease. Then, without warning, gravity failed. Sam's chair, no longer bolted properly to the floor, detached with a metallic clang and drifted backward. Arun caught mid-sip of coffee, sent the mug flying into the air, where it slowly rotated, spilling droplets in a lazy arc. Mira grabbed a rail before she could float off, while Rex, of course, simply cackled. "Oh, come on," Sam groaned, flailing to grab a handhold. "Arun, explain." Arun sighed, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose as he carefully maneuvered himself back to his station. "The gravity stabilizers are, shall we say, custom." Mira narrowed her eyes. "Custom?" "Built out of 3 different GravTech modules, one of which was salvaged from a Zavar scout ship, one from an outdated Terran freighter, and one from a luxury pleasure yacht." Sam blinked. "Wait, our gravity is partially based on alien party ship tech." Arun spread his hands. "It was available." "Awesome," Rex said, floating upside down. "Next time it fails, can we at least get some ambient jazz?" Mira pinched the bridge of her nose. "Arun, fix it." "I am attempting to fix it," Arun muttered, typing furiously at his console. "But it turns out hybrid gravity systems require constant recalibration. Also he shot a glare at Rex, rerouted auxiliary power to the forward railgun again, which means we have about half the energy needed to maintain a stable gravity field." Rex grinned. "What can I say? I like being prepared." "You like breaking things," Arun corrected. The ship jolted, and gravity snapped back on. Sam crashed to the floor with a pained oof. Arun managed to stay seated, though his coffee had not been so lucky. Rex landed on his feet like a cat. Mira didn't move at all. Fixed, Arun said, dusting himself off. Sam sat up, rubbing the back of her head. You sure? I don't feel any jazz. Sam, Myra's voice was edged with exasperation. I'm just saying. The ship's alarm blared, cutting her off. Arun's console beeped urgently. Oh, that's not good. Mira snapped into command mode instantly. Talk to me. Arun's fingers flew over his controls. I've got a contact. It just dropped out of FTL. Zavar cruiser. It's sweeping the supply corridor. Sam whistled. Well, that's sooner than expected. Rex grinned. Told you I was right to divert power to the railgun. Mira ignored him, already running through their options. They weren't in firing range yet, but if the Zavar changed course even slightly, they'd be spotted. The Ulysses was not built for stealth. Its engines weren't shielded well. Its profile was anything but sleek, and it occasionally leaked atmosphere when the coolant vents overpressurized. But Mira wasn't going to roll over and die. Sam, take us into that debris field. Quietly. Sam's hands danced over controls. You got it. The Ulysses shifted course, slipping toward a nearby field of shattered hulls and drifting wreckage, remnants of a long-forgotten battle. If they were lucky, the debris would mask their signature just long enough for the cruiser to pass. Luck, unfortunately, had never been Myra's strong suit. Captain, Arun said slowly, staring at the screen. I think the cruiser just picked up our ion trail. Yep, Sam confirmed, tightening her grip on the controls. They're coming this way. Mira exhaled. Then we do this the hard way. Rex cracked his knuckles, grinning. Finally, the Ulysses wasn't supposed to be a warship. It shouldn't have been capable of standing against a Zavar cruiser, but that wasn't going to stop them from trying. The Zavar cruiser loomed on the Ulysses sensors, sleek and deadly, a predator. It was a stark contrast to the Ulysses, which, Mira noted grimly, was more akin to a wounded scavenger with one good eye and a limp. Okay, she said, voice steady. We're officially being hunted. Sam's fingers hovered over the thruster controls, eyes flicking between readouts. If we make a break for it, they'll tag us before we clear the debris field. Agreed. Arun said, sweat beading on his forehead. Their targeting systems will have a lock before we're even halfway out. Rex, ever the optimist, leaned against his chair, arms crossed. So, what? We just sit here and hope they forget we exist? Mira stared at the Zavar vessel on the display, watching its search pattern tighten. No, she said. We make them think we're something we're not. Arun adjusted his glasses. That's vague. Mira turned to him. Can you rig the engines to emit a destabilized ion signature? Arun frowned. I can, but why? His eyes widened. Oh, you want to make us look like wreckage. Sam blinked. That's crazy. Rex grinned, which is why I love it. Mira ignored them. Arun, I'll need a few minutes, he said, already pulling up the schematics. I can force the core into low-power mode and modulate the exhaust so it mimics an old battlefield Hulk. But that means shutting down nearly everything. Will be a floating tin can. Mira nodded. Do it. The ship dimmed as Arun worked, the hum of the engines lowering to a whisper. A faint tremor ran to the hull as the Ulysses' emissions distorted. To enemy sensors, they would appear as nothing more than another shattered husk drifting in the void. The only problem was, if this didn't work, they'd be sitting ducks. Silence fell over the bridge, tension coiling like a wire pulled too tight. The Zavar cruiser prowled closer, its sleek frame gliding through the wreckage. Mira held her breath. A heartbeat. Another. Then a proximity alarm blared. Arun swore. They're launching a probe. A spherical drone detached from the cruiser, gliding toward them with predatory patience. Myra's mind raced. Rex, how much scrap is still in the cargo bay? Rex caught on fast. Enough to make some convincing wreckage. Good, Mira said. Sam, get ready to fire maneuvering thrusters on my mark. Arun, kill the beacon on the probe once it gets close. The drone drifted toward them. Mira clenched her jaw, waiting. A long pause. Then, now! Sam pulsed the thrusters just enough to send the Ulysses spinning, mimicking a dead ship caught in an orbit. At the same time, Arun jammed the probe signal, while Rex ejected debris from the cargo hold. Metal chunks drifted, bouncing off the hull in a convincing display of neglect. The probe scanned them. Then, slowly, it turned back toward the cruiser. "Did we just—" Sam whispered. The Zavar ship lingered, waiting. Then, after what felt like an eternity, it adjusted course and continued its patrol. Mira let out a slow breath. "We're clear." Arun collapsed against his console, wiping his brow. That was unpleasant. Rex grinned. "You kidding? That was art." Mira didn't let herself relax. "We need to move before they double back." Sam re-engaged the engines, careful to keep their energy signature minimal. The Ulysses slipped further into the debris field, putting distance between them and the enemy. Only once they were well beyond scanning range did Mira allow herself to sit back. "We just outsmarted a Zavar cruiser." Arun exhaled, stunned. "We shouldn't have survived that." Sam chuckled. "But we did." Rex threw up his hands. "Which means we officially have bragging rights." Mira allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "Let's get to the rendezvous point before we run out of luck." As the Ulysses disappeared into the void, the Zavar cruiser continued its patrol, oblivious of the warship that shouldn't exist, yet did. The Ulysses limped into the shadow of a derelict space station, its engine sputtering like an old ground car on its last fumes. The Zavar cruiser was long behind them, but their problems were far from over. Mira Voss stood at the bridge, arms crossed, surveying their destination. The station, Harrow's Drift, was a lawless trading post, an abandoned mining platform repurposed as a haven for smugglers, scavengers, and those who didn't want to be found. It was the kind of place where deals were made with a handshake in one hand and a knife in the other. "We're docked," Sam reported, shutting down the engines with a relieved sigh. "Barely." Arun rubbed his temples. "The reactor needs a full diagnostic. Half our thrusters are misaligned, and the coolant system is venting something that probably shouldn't be vented." Mira nodded. "Then we'd better find what we need. Keep it low-key. Last thing we need is a fight." Rex clapped his hands together. "Good thing you brought me, then." Mira eyed him. "You are specifically the reason I said that." The crew descended into the underbelly of Harrow's Drift, where the scent of rust fuel and desperation clung to the recycled air. Dim lighting flickered overhead, illuminating a market of salvage goods and questionable services. "All right," Mira said. "We split up. Arun, you're with me. We need reactor parts. Sam, see if you can find a working navigational array. Rex," she hesitated. "Just don't get arrested." Rex placed a hand on his chest in mock offense. "Captain, please. Have I ever?" "Yes." The rest of the crew said in unison. Rex grinned. "Fair point. I'll see what I can dig up." The engineer and the hustler, Mira and Arun, wove through the market, stopping at a stall cluttered with disassembled machinery. A squat alien with 6 arms and 3 blinking eyes inspected them warily. "You buy, or you waste my air?" the vendor rasped. Mira got straight to the point. "We need a micro-stabilizer and a phase coil." The vendor snorted. "Expensive. Military grade." Arun, ever the pragmatist, chimed in. "They don't need to be military grade. Just functional." The alien leaned in. "Still expensive." Mira met its gaze, cool and unyielding. "We have credits." "Then I have parts," the vendor said, smirking. Arun, meanwhile, glanced over the wares and frowned. "This phase coil shot. It's got residual burn from an overload." The vendor waved a dismissive hand. "Works fine." Arun folded his arms. "If you define fine as explodes the moment we power it up." Mira sighed, resisting the urge to rub her temples. "What else do you have?" The haggling continued. By the time they secured what they needed, Mira was convinced they'd overpaid, but at least their ship wouldn't disintegrate mid-flight. The pilot and the gamble. Sam, meanwhile, had followed a lead to a backroom dealer specializing in surplus ship tech. The man, a wiry Terran with cybernetic eyes, leaned over a cluttered desk. "You need an AV array?" he asked, appraising her. "That's right," Sam said. Something with range and accuracy. No junk. The dealer grinned. I do have something Brockary make top tier, but it's not cheap. Sam considered her options. She had some credits, but not enough. She glanced at a small console on the desk, displaying a game of chance. Some kind of alien dice system. How about we make this interesting? She said, flashing a grin. I win. You drop the price by half. The dealer chuckled. And if you lose? Sam shrugged. Then I'll owe you a favor. The man studied her, then nodded. Deal. The game was tense. The dice tumbled. The probabilities shifted, and Sam leaned into the uncertainty with calculated confidence. When the final roll landed in her favor, she smirked. The dealer groaned. You're a menace. Sam winked. I hear that a lot. The wild card and the double cross. Rex, of course, found trouble. He had intended to keep things simple. Scout for supplies, maybe pocket a few unguarded items. But then he saw a familiar face. Targ Van, a Zavar informant and all-around rat, was speaking to a cloaked figure. The only words Rex caught were Ulysses and bounty. His stomach sank. With a casual air, Rex strolled up behind Targ, clamping a hand on his shoulder. Fancy seeing you here. Targ jumped, his reptilian eyes widening. O'Malley, what are you doing here? Rex grinned. Oh, vacation. Targ tried to pull away. I don't have time for this. Rex tightened his grip. See, I think you do. Because I just heard you say Ulysses, and I'd love to know why. Targ bared his sharp teeth. Nothing personal. Just business. Rex smiled. Funny. That's exactly what I was going to say. A few minutes later, Mira, Arun, and Sam found Rex waiting for them at the docks, looking very pleased with himself. Mira eyed him warily. What did you do? Rex feigned innocence. Me? Nothing. He pulled out a data chip. But I did acquire some interesting information. Mira took the chip, plugging it into her wrist console. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing a Zavar transmission. Ulysses has resurfaced. All available forces are to locate and eliminate it immediately. Arun paled. They know we're alive. Sam muttered a curse. Mira stared at the message, then at her crew. She took a slow breath. Then we don't have much time. She turned toward the Ulysses, its battered hull gleaming under the station lights. We leave now. As the crew rushed aboard, one thought echoed in Myra's mind. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were being hunted. The Ulysses shot out of Harrow's Drift, its newly patched systems barely holding together. Behind them, the station shrank into the void, but there was no time to celebrate, because waiting for them, cutting off any chance of escape, was a Zavar battlecruiser, a behemoth of war. Its obsidian hull bristled with weapons, and its sleek, predatory form blocked the only clear route out of the system. Mira Voss gripped the armrest of her chair as warning lights flared across the Ulysses bridge. Arun's hands flew over the controls, reading sensor data. Zavar-class battlecruiser imminence, Arun reported, voice tight. Armament includes 6 heavy plasma batteries, point defense turrets, and a full complement of interceptors. If they deploy fighters, we'll be swarmed before we can make a jump. Any weaknesses? Mira asked. Arun frowned. No obvious ones. Sam let out a low whistle. Well, that's a big problem. The comm system crackled to life. A cold, modulated voice filled the bridge. Unidentified vessel. You are in violation of Zavar space. You are an anomaly, a mistake. Surrender, and your deaths will be swift. Mira exhaled. They always have to add the die quickly part. Rex chuckled, leaning against his console. At least they're efficient. Arun's display flashed red. They're locking on. Myra's mind raced. They couldn't outrun the battlecruiser. Not with their ship still recovering. They couldn't outgun it either. But they could outthink it. She turned to Rex. You pulled data from that informant. Please tell me you have something useful. Rex was already scrolling through stolen Zavar files. Depends. What's your definition of useful? Mira gave him a sharp look. Right. He muttered, tapping through the files. Here. The Eminence has an advanced targeting system. State-of-the-art, really. But it's all slave to a single central processing hub. Arun's eyes widened. Wait, they centralize their entire targeting suite? He paused and smirked. That's a mistake. Mira leaned forward. Can we jam it? Arun thought for a moment. Then his expression turned determined. If I overload our sensor suite and broadcast a corrupted signal on their frequency, it could disrupt their targeting algorithms. They'd still have guns, but they wouldn't know where to fire. Do it. Arun's fingers flew over his console, rerouting power and modifying the ship's sensor output. The Ulysses shuddered as it pulsed with an artificial signal, flooding the Zavar's battle systems with erratic noise. The Eminence hesitated. Its turrets swiveled in confusion, searching for a lock. It's working! Arun shouted. Sam, get us behind them, Mira ordered. The Ulysses dove into the wreckage of an old battlefield, weaving through debris as Sam pushed the ship to its limits. The Zavar ship, unable to lock onto them, fired blindly, its plasma blast striking only empty space. Now that's satisfying, Rex muttered. Mira wasn't done. Rex, prep torpedoes. Arun, find us an exposed system, something we can cripple. Arun scanned rapidly. Their primary engine manifold is vulnerable. A few direct hits there, and they're dead in the water. Mira nodded. Lock torpedoes. Fire on my mark. Rex's hands hovered over the launch controls. Ready. Mira watched the battlecruiser struggle to adjust, its massive frame sluggish, its weapons failing. They're not invincible, she realized. They just think they are. Fire. The torpedoes streaked through the darkness, slipping past the battlecruiser's scrambled defenses. They struck the exposed engine housing, detonating in a cascade of brilliant fire. The Eminence lurched violently, secondary explosions ripping through its stern. They're crippled. Arun cheered, but the Zavar weren't giving up. Warning sirens blared as a squadron of interceptors launched from the battlecruiser's underbelly, streaking toward them like angry hornets. Here they come, Sam muttered. Myra's mind raced. They didn't have the firepower to take on a full fighter squadron, but they did have something else. Arun, she said, thinking fast. Can we reverse the jamming pulse? Make it look like we're everywhere at once. Arun blinked, then grinned. Oh, that's devious. He worked fast, tweaking the signal. Within moments, the Ulysses projected dozens of ghostly echoes across the battlefield. The incoming Zavar fighters swerved erratically, unable to determine which target was real. They're confused, Sam said. We have a window. Mira sees a chance. Sam, punch it. Get us out of here now. The Ulysses shot forward, slipping through the chaos. Plasma fire streaked past them, missing by miles as the enemy scrambled to adjust. Then, with one final surge of power, the Ulysses entered hyperspace, vanishing into the void. Epilogue, a warship that defies fate. Hours later, the crew gathered in the dim glow of the bridge, exhaustion mixing with exhilaration. We actually just did that, Sam said, shaking her head. Arun laughed in disbelief. We shouldn't have survived. Mira exhaled slowly, looking around at her crew. Scrappy, brilliant, reckless. They weren't soldiers. They weren't the best equipped, the strongest, or the most advanced. But they were human, and that had made all the difference. We're not just running anymore, she said softly. The Zavar think we shouldn't exist. She smiled. Let's prove them wrong. Outside, the Ulysses soared into the unknown, a legend in the making, a warship that should never have been. Yet it fought, and it would fight again.